Good morning, John.
Morning, Brian.
You're going to talk about is the church passing on the faith.
That's correct. Uh, is the church passing on the faith? We know that in Ireland, which was one time known as the island of saints and scholars in the early centuries, and responsible for bringing the faith to Europe, funny enough, and not alone to Europe but throughout the world. So that's the background from a country that suffered grievously for hundreds of years with persecution and penal laws and priests hunted. So we progressed to having this business of vocations that more than enough for the parishes in the country, and priests going abroad, the Columban Fathers, and all the various orders that were established for to go to the missions, and they did a great work all over the world. Now, what's the story now? There's no vocations, not enough even to fill one diocese. So priests are old and sometimes staying as priests until they're well past their retirement age and are not fit to do the chores that a priest is responsible for. Where heretofore there was two or three, there was a parish priest and two or three curates in most parishes, and so there was plenty to do the work and share the work, and plus conversations among themselves in the parish house in the evening time and they all had their own quarters in those the big houses, because there were big houses for the parish priest. Now they're too big for the man that's living there now compared to what there was. And of course, when there's no vocations, it means then that other things suffer. What was here in this country and what I was brought up in and what many ones were brought up on the Catholic faith, churches was packed. There was plenty of priests. There was the confessions and Holy Communion for 90% of Catholics, and then there was devotions for those. When we were young, we mightn't have been that keen, but there was devotions, the Rosary and the Rosary and Benediction once a week in every parish in every church in the country. The Latin Rite was the universal language which we were taught. I was an older boy and taught that and was able to say the responses in Latin, and the priest facing the tabernacle and churches packed. And plenty of priests. Now all that was changed. And there was men and women's sodalities that was discontinued. And with the result then that the number of people practicing the Catholic faith has dwindled. In some places in Dublin, which was churches were packed, because I lived in Dublin from 18 years onwards after born in Dublin and then back to it and worked there, and churches were packed up to my damn near 30s because there was none of these changes that they introduced, and gradually the faith weakened. Vocations began to drip away, and but we still had the same number of bishops and archbishops. So, but with a shortage of priests and media attack on the church and the Catholics and nuns and priests and all the rest of it, they did such great work. So vocations has dropped, and now sometimes churches will be closed, and it's suggested in some places that lay people, I presume there would be, I don't know whether, I presume they'd have to be trained and be practicing Catholics, to be actually doing funerals, which is a very peculiar context considering that it never happened before. So these are the likely things that could happen according to the bishops that have passed on this information. And lay people will have to do more than what they're doing plenty at the moment, but they'll have to do more. So this doesn't seem to be the way to go forward. They nearly want to sort of, if you throw out the baby with the bathwater, you're going to have problems. And to do away with what people were used to, and men's and women's sodalities strengthen family life, so that family life was in the generally speaking, was better. Now family life is not supported like with that, and then so family life has suffered as a result, and people now. Some get married in the Catholic Church, but some get married in other outlets, and so these are the consequences of doing away with the things that they get done away with. And now, with the Green Agenda, apparently 10 parishes, or 10 dioceses rather, have given up fossil fuels. And fossil fuels sounds like something out of space, but fossil fuels is turf and coal, which we all use, especially turf, and central heating, the central heating, the kerosene that's used for central heating, been done away with in 10 dioceses, including headquarters in Armagh, and making a publicity about it. What's the point of that? So the people that supply the central heating as did, and there was all the radiators in the church, at a vast expense, and this helped to heat the church in the winter, which can be quite cold in this country, and so now with the lack of congregations, perhaps they can't afford it, and the price of the kerosene gone sky high. For some reason or another. Whether it's to do with the Green Agenda, I don't rightly know, but there's some connection, I'm sure. So they've gone to fossil fuels. So that means then the people that supply the products that they were using heretofore now will be suffering, and probably to be unemployment in those areas. I don't know what they're going to use when they've done away with that for to heat these churches and their parish homes and all the rest of it. So they're going away with fossil fuels. And of course then they changed the Mass as was in Latin, which we were told is the universal language of the church, which it was. You could go to any country and it was done that way, so you could follow it with your missal. And we had missals from a young age. There wasn't this business of not knowing what they were talking about. We knew, we could follow it. And even from a young age. So when you do away with these things, there's consequences. But we still have the same number of bishops for dwindling congregations. I'm sure donations must be down drastically. So you want to kind of revisit and go back to what maybe was done and what helped. In other words, go back to the things that they do. Reintroduce the Mass as was, the Latin Rite, in as many churches as possible. And bring back the Rosary and Benediction as was, and the men's and women's sodalities and other items, and celebrate the Latin Mass in as many churches in this country and in other churches throughout the world, and vocations will come to pass, and people will gradually come back, because it's the Latin Rite Masses where there's young people going in other countries where they're celebrated, but not in the countries, not in the churches where it's done in the vernacular or in the local language. And even in the local language, the priest should be facing the tabernacle, which, according to Catholics, is the body, blood, soul and divinity in the tabernacle in every Catholic church. Now some tabernacles are not behind the altar where they always were, and priests are facing the congregation, but they're back to the tabernacle, and they should be facing the tabernacle as they were. So there's things that the bishops need to sort of implement, and also need to speak out against the secular agenda, which is given a free hand, and your silence indicates acceptance of such evil. Being popular or being this, that or the other is not the way to go, and some of the churches that have done away with the fossil fuels have sort of said the young people will be encouraged, but young people are not practicing the Catholic faith or Christian faith in other denominations. They're suffering declines as well. So they need to sort of wake up and address these issues and go back to the way, the truth and the life, and do what's required to bring back the people to practice their Catholic and Christian faith in other denominations, and also to help to sort of stem this secular agenda that that is not good for anyone that wants a spiritual way of life, and you're not going to get it. You're not going to have your soul nourished if masses are going to be restricted, and which they are. And some churches now, there won't be a mass because priests are going to two or three different parishes and they're not fit for it. So they're not able to do their job. And of course, they're not preaching about the sacrament of confession, which they should be which should be preaching. So there's a lot of things needing to be done to bring back things in some way to regenerate. And so they'd want to go back and do that. So from the point of view of passing on the faith, they don't seem to be doing their effort in that direction. And the sermons have, because of the lack of vocations, the quality of the sermons has dwindled. And so attendance at churches, even in the country areas, has dwindled as well, in parishes that used to be packed, and where there was men's and women's adulteries responsible for a great deal of charitable work in the churches, because the Stations of the Cross were donated by parishioners, the altar aids were donated by parishioners, and they should be reinstated in the churches. They should have never been taken out of the churches, a form of desecration, and this was on the order of bishops. Those altar aids were paid for by parishioners in this country and in other countries when they didn't have that much money, and so even poor people helped in this area. So the altar aids was paid for by the parishioners, Stations of the Cross, and in some cases the stained glass windows, because I've seen people going back where they needed these windows. So they did a lot of good work, and yet these churches now are becoming nearly empty compared to what they were. So they'd want to revisit what brought the vocations and stop going down any agenda that's otherwise. This is where the problem is, and they need to do it in this country and in other countries and speak the truth, and don't be afraid to speak it, and speak it publicly. Their silence is not conducive to encouraging people to practice their Catholic faith. So that's the Christian TV Ireland project, when it comes into being, with the help of donations from our people in this country and abroad. When that comes into being, we will be addressing these issues. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, John.